Tonight you will press a button and light will appear. You won't think about it. You won't feel grateful for it. It will just happen. But for most of human history, that button didn't exist. There was no switch. There was only darkness and cold, and the sound of something moving in the trees that you couldn't see. So how did you go from that darkness to a lit room in seconds? The answer starts almost 2 million years ago, long before anyone who looked like you existed. Picture a landscape in East Africa. Dry grass, lightning on the horizon, a wildfire moving across the plain, the kind that happens on its own, again and again, for millions of years before anyone learned to control it. Early hominins didn't start these fires. They found them. They found the smoking, blackened ground after the flames passed, and on that ground, they found something strange. Roasted seeds, charred roots, animals that had died in the blaze, their meat already cooked. They ate it, and it was easier to chew. It gave them more energy for less effort. That single discovery may be one of the most important accidents in the story of your species. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades studying this moment. His theory is called the cooking hypothesis, and it argues something radical. Cooking didn't just change what early humans ate, it changed their bodies. Raw food takes enormous energy to digest. Your gut has to work hard to break down tough plant fibers and raw meat. Cooking does some of that work for you, outside your body, before the food ever reaches your mouth. Wrangham argues that once hominins started eating cooked food regularly, their guts could shrink. And when the gut uses less energy, that energy goes somewhere else. It goes to the brain. Think about that for a second. The brain you're using right now to read this sentence may exist partly because your ancestors learned to eat food that had touched fire. But finding a wildfire is not the same as making one. For a very long time, that gap remained unclosed. Early humans were fire keepers, not fire makers. When lightning or lava gave them a flame, they protected it, they fed it. They carried burning branches from one camp to the next, sometimes for miles, because losing the flame meant starting over, and starting over meant waiting for the sky to give you another chance. Imagine that responsibility. One person, walking through the dark, holding the only warmth your entire group has. If it goes out, everyone is cold again. Everyone is exposed again. There is archaeological evidence of controlled fire use at a site called Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 1 million years ago. Ash and burned bone fragments were found deep inside the cave, far from any lightning strike. That depth matters. It suggests the fire didn't wander in on its own. Someone brought it there. Someone kept it going. In the dark, underground, far from where a natural blaze could ever reach. So when did humans stop depending on luck and start making fire themselves? The honest answer is that no one knows exactly. The evidence is scattered and the dates are debated. But most researchers place reliable, repeated fire-making somewhere between 400,000 and 200,000 years ago. By then, humans had likely discovered 2 separate methods. The first is friction. Take a hard stick. Spin it fast against a softer piece of wood. The friction creates heat. The heat creates a small ember in the wood dust. That ember, fed carefully with dry grass and gentle breath, becomes a flame. It sounds simple when described in one sentence. It is not simple to do. Try it sometime, and you will feel, in your arms and your patience, exactly how much effort your ancestors invested in something you now get from a lighter that cost less than a coffee. The second method is percussion. Strike a piece of flint against the mineral called pyrite, or later, against certain kinds of iron ore. The impact throws off a spark. Land that spark in the right material, and you have the beginning of a fire. This method left evidence behind. Archaeologists have found strike marks on flint and pyrite fragments at sites in Europe dating back tens of thousands of years, worn down in a pattern that matches deliberate, repeated striking rather than accidental damage. Once humans could make fire on demand, everything shifted. Fire meant warmth in climates that would otherwise have been unlivable. It meant humans could move north, into colder regions, following animals and territory that earlier ancestors could never have survived long enough to reach. Fire meant protection. Large predators avoid flame. A circle of fire at night turned a vulnerable, sleeping group into something far harder to approach. Fire meant light after sunset, and light after sunset meant time. Time to talk. Time to make tools by hand instead of by daylight alone. Time to tell stories. Some researchers, including anthropologist Polly Wiesner, have studied modern hunter-gatherer groups like the Juhuansi of the Kalahari to understand what firelight actually does to human conversation. Her research found that daytime talk among these groups was dominated by practical matters, complaints, arguments, logistics. Nighttime talk, around the fire, was different. It shifted toward storytelling, toward myth, toward the kind of conversation that builds shared meaning inside a group, rather than just solving the day's problems. Firelight, in other words, may have created the first regular space for culture to be passed down out loud. Think about what that means. The oldest surviving human traditions, the earliest myths, the earliest shared histories, may have been shaped by nothing more than a group of people sitting in a circle of light, because the alternative was sitting in darkness. And there's one more piece to this story, quieter than the others, but just as important. Fire changed how humans slept. Without fire, nightfall meant danger and stillness. Predators are active in darkness. A group without light had every reason to stay tense, to stay alert, to sleep in short, cautious bursts. With fire, that changed. A burning flame at the edge of camp meant the group could relax. Deeper, longer sleep became possible. And longer sleep, particularly REM sleep, is closely tied to memory consolidation and cognitive function. So even your ability to rest, to actually rest, may trace back to a group of early humans who learned to keep a flame alive through the night. Which brings you back to tonight, and that button you'll press without thinking. When you flip that switch, you are not just turning on a light. You are finishing something that started with a wildfire on an African plain nearly 2 million years ago. You are finishing something that took a species that couldn't yet speak, couldn't yet write, couldn't yet imagine writing, and gave it warmth, protection, extra time, and a reason to sit close together and talk. The switch feels ordinary because it is the end of the story, not the beginning. But somewhere behind that ordinary click is someone spinning a stick against dry wood for the 100th time, hands blistered, refusing to stop, because they already understood something you rarely have to think about anymore. Light is not guaranteed. It has to be made. Tonight, you will press a button and light will appear. And for the first time, maybe you'll notice it.